This is going to be fairly informal. We're not doing an expert presentation. In fact, actually, in this space right now, we would say that, and a lot of people say exactly the same thing, that there are no experts. There are just people that have had a go, that have learned some stuff along the way, and are able to share some of that learning so that others can think about where they might be at on that journey and maybe get involved as well. Um, I was at a conference last Friday with the West Midlands network of funders, and it was just great being in the same space as other people that are on a similar journey. Some people just starting out, some people a bit more advanced, and really wanting and looking together as a sector to start getting word out there as to what are the benefits of artificial intelligence? How do you use it in such a way that you counter the objections, make sure that it's human centered, vision and values led, and does exactly what you need it to do and ends up sounding like you, which for us, particularly in the third sector, is really important. And so I was saying, we're at the conference. It's great to connect with other people. And that's partly what we want to do today. This is about connecting to each other, connecting to people who are on this journey so that we can share, so that we can learn. And one of the things that kind of we've really started centering on as an organization recently is that connection is the key to change. And that's true whether you're looking at individual human lives, local systems and partnerships, and in the way that we would like to build a fairer, more equitable society together. It's as we collaborate and connect with one another and share knowledge and wisdom that we move in the direction of making things more the way that we would like to see them down the line. So my name's Matt. I'm the managing director of Street Support Network. So Street Support Network is an organization that brings together local partnerships across 30 locations in the UK who are making solutions in homelessness available in a digital space. And you'll see a little bit more about how that works with our virtual assistant later. And it's great to see some of our partners here today that are part of that network and that are working with us, seeking together to make homelessness brief, non-recurrent, and we want as little of it as possible. So I said my name's Matt. I generally start off nowadays any talk that I give by saying that I am a trauma survivor. I have an ACEs score of 4. I'm neurodiverse. My wife is neurodiverse, and I have 2 adopted kids with special needs. And the reason I say that is because that speaks as to the perspective that I bring to these things, the fact that I have lived experience of some of the issues. And I don't want you to switch off thinking that I'm some kind of AI guy, and think that this isn't for you. This is really for everybody. It is accessible. It is something that you can get stuck into and you can start today. But I did 10 years in frontline homelessness services, running organizations, took a break to adopt our second kid, retrained in artificial intelligence whilst I was on sabbatical, and then decided that I would bring what I'd learned back to the sector to try and see if we can do something more with less within the context of both homelessness and the charitable sector. And my goal today and generally in what I'm doing at the moment is about bringing together frontline empathy and compassion alongside cutting edge technology so that we can help you to help more people. And the other person that's going to be speaking today is my colleague Mara, who's going to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Mara and my heart's beating really fast. I am the comms and engagement lead for Street Support Network. I'm giving you a bit of my background just for context here. I've got 8 years marketing experience, and before that, I did a 3-year degree in creative writing. I'm super passionate about the power of words all that to say that I was probably the most skeptical person ever about using AI to produce content, to the point where if you'd have asked me 6, 7 months ago, well, before I met Matt, essentially, that I would be co-hosting a webinar on encouraging the use of it, I would have just not believed you.
And that really is kind of part of the journey that we're looking at today, is kind of, what does it look like to start from zero, and then to look at how might you consider an initial introduction of AI tools and adding them into your workflow, but then actually progressing that journey, because we're now at a point as an organization where it's not us plus AI, it's AI plus, and then we bring things to that. So we've gone from adding artificial intelligence into the mix bit by bit to actually putting at the heart of pretty much everything that we do as an organization, and using it in ways that are transforming our workflows and the way we conduct our business. But like Mara said, she started out with skepticism. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about that, Mara?
Yeah, skepticism is an understatement. So when I first joined Street Support Network, I realized it was my first role in the third sector and my first role in homelessness. So there was a lot to learn. And one of the things I learned really quickly was that our sector is so noisy. There are lots of organizations, there are lots of voices, there are lots of politics. And I spent a lot of time and research at the beginning trying to like discover and define our tone of voice, how we should be speaking. And it came out to something very simple and human and accessible. Um, so when I started to hear about people using AI to do their writing, I just honestly didn't possibly believe that what was essentially a robot could come to the same conclusion and style that I did after all that work, because so much of what I defined our tone of voice around and how we speak to people, how we email, how we speak on social media, all that comes from our values, which are, as an organization, deeply human. Our values are love and compassion and integrity. And I just didn't think that it would be able to emulate that. Um, Spoiler, it can. um, but we'll get into that a bit later. And then my fear around it, I guess, turned 180. If it can do it, then where's my place? Will it take my job? And I think that's another thing that all of us fear quite a lot with AI is, will it replace humans? Because it is so much cheaper.
So you may identify with some of those fears. Feel free to stick something in the chat if you think actually that's where you're at right now. But the backdrop to all of this, I think right across the charitable sector, definitely specifically in our area of homelessness, is that we are in a moment of crisis where there is rising demand left, right, and centre. The need is going up, the funding has gone down. So we're being asked to do more with less. And since the pandemic, we've seen charities folding, we've seen funding cuts. We're struggling with finances, with burnout from having to cram in all the hours that we can to try and make it work, especially small charities. That's kind of the canvas, the backdrop to where things are at right now. Um, and so we're kind of maybe skeptical on the one hand, but also at the same time, maybe slightly hopeful that if we can make these things work, that actually it would give a lifeline to a sector that is really struggling. And that's that's why I came back into the social sector, to bring those artificial intelligence skills with me, because knowing what it can do and how much of a help it can be, I want to make sure that everybody can and has access to be able to A, get trained, B, use these tools, and C, really see levels of job satisfaction, productivity going through the roof, at the same time as giving the sector a voice within the AI context to be able to shape where it's heading in the future and not have everything dictated to us by corporate organizations that are only seeking to make money. And there is another concern that kind of arises around human sustainability. As I had a question asked of me last Friday, we're all feeling burnt out right now. If you bring AI into the mix and increase your productivity, are we just not going to find that more and more is being asked of us and that the bar's going to get raised and that we're going to end up, doing more with even less and that we'll get taken advantage of? And the answer to that is there's a risk of that if we don't, in a sense, push back and make sure that we're standing firm on the vision and values of the sector and, increasing efficiency and productivity, yes, but not for its own sake. The point is, one, to increase job satisfaction, two, to reduce burnout, and three, to have more time to do the stuff that we love doing, that we're in this for, which is the human connection side of things, or the wildlife connection. If you're, there's somebody here from a wildlife charity, so you get to spend more time with the ducks rather than on the computer, which is, what we all want in a sense. We're in it in this sector because we are passionate and compassionate, and we want to be doing more of that stuff, not ending up spending all of our time on admin and fundraising and social media and marketing and a whole host of other things that, as you will hopefully learn today, machines can do really, really well. And so it's about sustaining a work-life balance, preventing burnout. And I shouldn't say this because my chair of trustees is here, but there are occasionally Fridays where we get to lunchtime on a Friday, and I would say that my productivity has increased by 50% over the last 6 months. And if I've done everything that I needed to do that week, sometimes I will finish a little bit early just to take a breather and not end up completely burnt out and sustain my work-life balance, because I'm using these tools in such a way that means that the value the organization is getting out of me far exceeds what I'm putting in and the hours that I'm doing. And that can be the same for yourselves too. Opportunities just to bring a bit more balance into your working day and not have to feel like you're constantly working flat out and not always getting anywhere or not always getting to the things that you really want to be doing. So if we head back to the beginning, because we said that we would kind of try and seek to take you on a journey. So I came in and introduced artificial intelligence, but first explained to the team that it would really help them if we could do something concrete that would draw them into the space to see what it was capable of. And I needed to get a really good handle on the organization itself, because I joined the organization 6 months ago, didn't actually know anything about it much before the interview, apart from what I could find out online. And so I really needed to get up to speed as quickly as possible in understanding the organization. So I had some tools available to me around doing what's called a brand review, which means you work through the vision, values, barriers and opportunities, stakeholders, shared needs, market proposition, brand position of the entire organization. So you end up with a single document that kind of says everything that needs to be said about the organization and is, like a blueprint for who we are, and what we do. So I put together a questionnaire, 10 questions only, sent them out to staff, trustees, stakeholders of the organization, and they were really good at getting back to me quickly. So by the end of week one, or even earlier, I think I had responses from everybody that I needed to have information from. We then took all of those answers, fed them into an LLM, so a foundation model. So that's Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, what colloquially known as chatbots, and asked it to draw out common themes, common answers to the questions, and to start piecing together what that looked like for us as an organization. I then sent that back to the stakeholders to get their input. We tweaked it slightly, gave it back to ChatGPT, and then formulated it into the brand review document with our vision, our values, right the way down to a two-word sentence, which is the brand position, that summed up the organization. And we landed on connecting solutions, because that's what we do as an organization. And those of you that are part of the network will get a sense of what that means for us as an organization. And then I sent that back to the stakeholders to ask them, is this a good reflection of Street Support Network on the whole? And is there anything that needs amending? And Mara, what were your thoughts when that came back to you?
The results of that brand review document genuinely impressed me. It was the first the first instance I really knew that this was going to be a very special tool, because not only did it look like something I would write, it looked like something I would write in 4 weeks, and ChatGPT did it in 4 minutes. And I think the reason why it was so brilliant is because it started off very human. I mean, it had all of our responses to the questions, the trustees, the team, volunteers, and then it had gone through it, and then it had had our review afterwards. And I think that was the key. That's why it sounded human, because it had had that input at every step, even though it was being organized and collated by a bot. And it was at that point that ChatGPT actually began to sound like us. So if you were putting that in as a foundation, the results of that brand review, and asking for a tone of voice document or some social media posts or a blog post, it sounded like something I would write. And I'm picky. So that was amazing. And it was at that point that I stopped seeing it as an enemy to writing. It is worth saying I didn't start seeing it as a friend. I started seeing it as, and I still do, a tool. And it's just a brilliant, now for me, brilliant tool in my toolbox.
And so one of the things that we want to kind of do today is reframe artificial intelligence as a tool, so that you can understand a bit more about why you use it, how you use it, what you use it for, and hopefully start thinking about getting into using it for yourselves. Um, I make a big distinction in this sense, so that you get a picture of what your relationship to a large language model should be. We talk about augmented intelligence rather than artificial intelligence. And the difference between the two, because if you think artificial intelligence, you're thinking sentient machines, you're thinking they're thinking for themselves and are kind of separate to you and have got all this stuff embedded in them that is separate to you and doesn't necessarily reflect who you are. Whereas actually, the way artificial intelligence works is you train it on a data set, and it learns from that data and then uses that data to produce outputs. And at a global level, ChatGPT, for example, is trained on millions and millions and millions of packets of data from all sorts of documents. But then within quite a few of those LLMs, you have custom functions. So in ChatGPT, they're called custom GPTs. In Copilot, if you're in the Microsoft environment, you call them agents. What you can do is you can put barriers in place and some guardrails around the learning and where artificial intelligence goes to do its searching and finding out what it is that you're looking for by customizing it and teaching it to be more like you. So your brand review document, your tone of voice document, your marketing strategy, your annual reviews, you can upload vast quantities of information to train it on who you are, whether that be personally or as an organization, and then restrict the outputs that it gives you and where it goes to look for information to the information that you've given it and some other stuff from outside, because that's always helpful. um, but that's where you get to it sounding like you and thinking like you, because you've trained it to do just that, and it does a really a really good job of of augmenting your intelligence. So it's that sense of it's drawing things out of you. Pretty much every time you put a prompt in and it gives you an output, it asks you questions afterwards. And so it's trying to tease things out of you. It's like a coaching model. But one of the best things that you can do if you want to, to really enhance the level of your work using an LLM, is to say to it, "This is what I'm looking to do. This is what my starting point. This is the information I've got so far. Now, can you ask me any questions that you think that you need to know the answer to from me in order to be able to fulfill the task?" And often it will give you a list of a dozen questions that it wants answers to, and you might not have even thought about those being questions that needed to be answered in order to carry out the piece of work. And so you give it replies to all of those questions, as you give it as much information, give it context, upload documents, and it takes all of that into consideration when it is producing outputs. And there's a question in the chat says it's saying, as an organization, are we open as to when AI has been used and do we acknowledge its use? You can safely assume that if we have sent out a document, put out some content, or done anything, that AI would have been involved in it, because we are open about the fact that AI's use is pretty much right across the organization. Um, and we'll come on to privacy and GDPR in due course. So at the moment, we're looking to reframe AI as a tool. And so picture yourself in a prison yard using a sledgehammer to break up rocks, and somebody comes and offers you a pneumatic drill to get the job done. Chances are you'd take them up on it, but it's a slightly more technical tool and carries an element of danger. So you need to be trained and use it wisely. But you definitely want to be using it because it's quicker and more powerful, and you can achieve far greater results and outcomes with better tools. So our encouragement is use the tools that are available. And we don't believe that these tools are going away. This isn't going to be a fad. The likelihood is that we're only 2 or 3 years away from having a split in the workforce between those that can use artificial intelligence in the way that we're talking about today and those that can't. And it will be part of the interview process where you'll get asked if you can do these things. And if you can't, you'll be at a disadvantage compared to other candidates, because it's here to stay. It's part of the ways of working going forwards. And so that's why we also want to encourage use, because as we use it, we are participating in shaping what it will look like going forwards and becoming part of the conversation around making sure that it is more human centered, more vision and values led. If we don't join that conversation, if we don't participate in what is happening, and those tools will be shaped for us and without us, and we will get left behind. This is our opportunity to embed our voice and our values and our priorities within artificial intelligence from the start, making sure it works for people and communities. It's not just about keeping up with trends, it's about shaping artificial intelligence for a future that's more hopeful, more inclusive, and more human. The reality is that if we don't participate in embedding our values into these tools, then somebody else will embed their values, and that's unlikely to align with what we want as a sector. So within everything that we do, we use three main values around the use of these kind of tools: user first design, dignity, and transparency. So transparency is that question about, are we open about the use of AI? And the answer is absolutely yes, and completely unashamedly so. User first design is essentially thinking about who is it that is going to benefit from what I'm doing, and then working backwards. So take, for example, our fundraising assistant that we use. I started off by doing deep research using ChatGPT into all of the complaints and concerns that fundraisers were putting out there online about the use of artificial intelligence in fundraising applications, because there's a massive amount of material, funders complaining about generic applications, about the same phrases coming up time and time again, about them not being adapted to organizations. There's a lot of material out there. So we researched all of that using artificial intelligence, and then asked it to help us to address all of those concerns, and worked out how do we tell it not to do the things that funders were, literally to some extent up in arms about. And it is an iterative process. You have to kind of keep working through those things. Sometimes you set everything up and you get it going, and then it does a little bit more, or it tries to tweak things in a way that you didn't quite like. So you have to go back and then tell it, please don't do that again, and rewrite that into the instructions that you've given it. But it means that you end up with something that really works for you, but also works for the people that you are seeking to serve in the first place. So always have in mind, who is it that I'm trying to serve with the tools that I'm using? And that's where kind of another concern comes in around bias and discrimination. All tools have an element of bias, and AI is no different. If it's trained on biased materials, particularly thinking about the fact that most content out there will come from a male white perspective, because that's where a lot of the documentation and perspectives have come from. If it's trained on that, then there's a risk that that will end up being part of the core functionality of the model. So we have to be concerned about that. And left to its own devices, it will reflect the data that it's trained on. But that's where charities have a vital role to play. Because if we embed our vision, our values, and our voice, then we can start teaching artificial intelligence to operate with more fairness and more integrity, and making it more like our sector. And the reason that there is bias in it is because there was bias in the material that it was trained on. And where does that bias come from? That bias comes from humans. Humans have bias too, in the same way that artificial intelligence does. And artificial intelligence can actually help to surface some of our own blind spots when it's used wisely. So that's kind of a little bit about the framing of the general tools themselves. But I think it really helps if we're able to kind of show you some live examples of some of the things that we've been working on and working with. So we'll start off with what hopefully in the not too distant future will become the main tool that is being used by our service users. and that's a virtual assistant that we are in the process of deploying as a pilot project, hopefully within the next couple of weeks in Wolverhampton and Coventry on our sites, the micro sites that we have for those two locations. So I'm going to do a quick demonstration. I'm going to share my screen. When you go onto our website, hopefully, Imara, can you see that properly?
I just see a blank screen at the moment. Oh, there we go. All good.
So in the bottom right hand corner of the screen, we've got this box that pops up. I think we're possibly going to change the name, but irrelevant for the moment.
Sorry to
It says
interrupt
hi.
that. Sorry, but if anyone's like me and they've got all the pictures now over that side of their screen, if you
Just
just move
move them to the other side of the screen.
because the chat's in the bottom right.
So I'm going to click on that, and it's going to bring up a chat bot, a virtual assistant. I'm here to help you find the right support and services. How can I assist you? The main point of this is to connect people to organizations. So if you click on advice and guidance, it'll point you towards the page on our website that has advice and guidance for your local area. And if you want to search for a specific organization, which is a function that people use within this context, you can do that here as well. But we're going to look at help connecting to support. It's asked me to share my location, so I'm going to allow my browser to share my location with it. I can do that right now because I'm actually based in Wolverhampton. If you don't share your location, it asks for a postcode, and then you could put a Wolverhampton or a Coventry postcode in. It asks if you're accessing the service for yourself or on behalf of somebody else, because there's quite a lot of the time it's not just people who are in need who access the service. It's community organizations, frontline workers, faith communities that are sat down with somebody who's presented as having a need and access it in order to be able to assist that individual in getting connected to the solutions that they're looking for. And that really, for us, creates hubs in local communities where people will present at an early opportunity with a sense of digital inclusion and connection. So I'm going to say I'm accessing the service on behalf of myself. It asks, what would you like me to call you? Because we're looking at keeping it private, it doesn't ask for your name. It just asks for a designation. So there is absolutely nothing wrong with saying, I'd like to be called Donald Duck. It then asks whether you're in a crisis situation, because we just want to make sure that if people are accessing it and have some kind of immediate need that's dealt with, that has been covered off. So I'm not going to go into those. I'm going to put no, I'm not in immediate danger for the time being, to use the tool for its main function. And it's going to ask me, what is it that I'm looking for today? So I'm looking for housing. Am I currently experiencing homelessness? I'm going to say yes. So it's going to ask me a series of questions. Where am I sleeping? So let's say I'm sleeping on the street. It's recommending that I can do a street link report to the local outreach team of the local authority if I want to do so. And if I was to click on street link, it would take me to that page where I can make that report. It's asking me how long I've been in the situation. So I'm just going to say it's been recent. What was the main reason? Let's say relationship breakdown. Where am I currently having access to any money? So let's say benefits. Have I used the service before? No. Am I currently receiving support? No. So we're assuming this is somebody that's kind of coming fresh to it. Am I an asylum seeker, refugee, or migrant? That's really important, because depending on the answer I give to this question, it will determine whether or not I likely have access to public funds, which has implications in terms of what services I can connect with. Again, we're just going to keep it simple for the purposes of the demonstration, so I'm going to say no. And then again, so GDPR, there was a question around it, around privacy. We don't collect or store anything within this context that can personally identify the individual at this present time. No personal identifiable information. We're not retaining anything about you that hasn't been completely anonymized before we might use it as data. But because we're asking questions about sexuality, about age, about a number of things that fall under special category data, we still have to obtain express consent. So do you consent to us asking a few sensitive questions in order to get you the help you need? We'll say yes. going to ask me my age. I'm going to be generous and I'm going to put 25. Asks about gender. Again, this is just for identification of services, not specifically about various different categories of gender. Ethnicity, um, again, they're all questions that might determine that some services are available and others not. I know that in Wolverhampton, there's a accommodation provider that is specifically for the Afro-Caribbean community. Have I got any physical conditions? Have I got any mental health conditions? Am I pregnant or living with a person who is pregnant? Do I have dependent children? Now, you might be thinking that for somebody who is just kind of your bog standard, ordinary pathway, white British, sleeping on the streets, no special characteristics. This is a lot of questions. But the reality is that there are different pathways into housing and different organizations that you would interact with around your housing situation, depending on your answers to all of those questions. So the main point of those questions is to identify the most vulnerable people, which is often those with no recourse to public funds, those that are 16, 17 years old, those that have a conviction for arson, that identify with the LGBTQ plus community, for example, and make sure that those vulnerable individuals have tailored advice given to them as to who they might approach about their housing situation. We've got a mention here around previous convictions and access to a disclosure calculator so you can work out if your conviction is spent or not. Because if it isn't spent, you have to disclose it within a housing context. I'm going to say none just to keep it simple. And I don't identify with the LGBT plus community. And it's now checking relevant services locally. And it's brought me up a list of organisations in Wolverhampton that I can reach out to straight away to seek to get help for my emergency housing situation. And then at the end, it's going to ask me if I need help with anything else. And I can say yes, and then say, actually, I'd also like to find some food or various other options. So that's just a quick demonstration of the tool that we've built that is aimed specifically at connecting people to solutions within the context of the street support network and how we're helping people to get connected to solutions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So just while we're still on that subject, because we touched on trust, privacy concerns, GDPR, I like to distinguish between two different types of information. There's the information that you wouldn't put in the public domain. Don't ever upload anything of that kind of nature to artificial intelligence for privacy concerns and for GDPR reasons. And then there's everything else, which includes all of the generic information about your organization and your documents and your annual reviews and things that don't contain personal information. And I advocate that all ethics and governance policies on artificial intelligence should have a line in them that says, please do upload all of the rest of those documents, because we want machine learning to take place around as much as possible from the charitable and third sectors and the social sector, so that AI can learn what is a charity, how do we operate, what's our vision, what's our values, what does it look like to be human-centered. And the more we interact with it in this way, the more documents we upload, the more information we give it, the more we have that opportunity to be able to redress the balance. So in terms of what you call ethical and responsible AI, we just mentioned about needing policy in place. We kind of took a bit of a shortcut ourselves around that, but for very specific reasons. I was trained on building virtual assistants with Watson X, and so that seemed like the ideal platform to be able to use. IBM is a really reputable provider, and that comes with a sense of reassurance that it is secure, that it is private, it is trusted. And they have a framework for ethical and responsible AI that is built on 5 pillars: transparency, explainability, robustness, fairness, and privacy. And so we kind of adopted that framework because we were already looking at using IBM systems into how we would draft and word our own policy and governance framework. Um, and that works really well for us. There are various different ways that you can establish policy in this area. It's really important to do so. If there are any leaders of organizations here today, I don't know what your thoughts are on whether your people are already using AI, but the answer is they are. Everybody's dabbling somewhere, everybody's had a go or tried. And if they're doing so within your organizational context, outside of a proper framework of governance and accountability, then that puts you in a dangerous position. So you might as well get ahead of it, get some stuff in place, get your people trained up because they're going to want to be anyway, and be ahead of the curve. At this point, we'll bring in one other concern because we really do want to kind of work through all of the various things that you might have concerns about or that might be barriers to you, jumping in with both feet to this. And it's the environmental impact. There is a lot of scaremongering out there about the environmental impact of artificial intelligence. We've produced our own environmental impact and sustainability report to look at what is our position on this. And I'll say up front, because these things are quite subjective in a sense, that we distinguish between what we believe to be our responsibility and what we believe sits squarely with the companies that are producing these models. Because these models are around to stay, they're not going anywhere. Whether I use it or not, they will still be doing their thing. So there's some stuff that is my responsibility and some additional energy and water usage as a result of our organization using ChatGPT and a virtual assistant. And so we looked into what was the actual impact of that. If we have 20,000 unique users using the virtual assistant over the course of a year, that amounts to about 6 or 7 washing machine loads of washing over the whole year. It's not a huge amount of energy that is being put into that. In terms of our daily usage around ChatGPT and Claude and others, I use it quite heavily. My colleagues use it as well. It amounts roughly in terms of our usage as an organization to boiling the kettle 8 to 10 times a day, or running your laptop for 8 hours. So it's like running a single laptop for an extra 8 hours. And actually, what we found is that, and a lot of your organizations could easily be in a similar position, that we don't have any extra cash for hiring extra people right now and wouldn't be in a position to be able to do so. But because of the productivity and efficiency gains that we make using artificial intelligence, we're able to scale as though we had hired an extra person. And the carbon footprint that would come with that extra person is greater than our AI usage as an organization. And as an organization, we don't have an office. Offices actually, on average, amount to about 1,000 tons of carbon dioxide per year per desk with someone sitting at it, which is an enormous amount. So if you can do more remote working, require less office space, and connect better with others using some of these digital tools, you can actually really substantially reduce your carbon footprint compared to where you might be at now. So these conversations are far more nuanced, far more complicated than just, what the the press and media seem to be trying to make out right now. Our carbon footprint has probably gone down to some extent as a result of our AI usage compared to where it would be at if we were to do everything we're currently doing without the use of AI. So that's kind of looking at the virtual assistant side of things. That's a slightly more complicated tool that did require special training. And I've also got an organization that's helping me out with the build of that. What we also wanted to showcase are tools that can be brought into everyday use and that you can both build and make use of. So we'll hand back to Mara for that.
Hi everyone. I just wanted to say, Matt, as well, really quickly on the virtual assistant. It is boasting a bit, but like as an organization, we are so proud of that, because one of the biggest barriers to people reaching out for help is shame and judgment. And the thing is, with AI, it doesn't do that. Like, it's not built in at all. You do not have to look someone in the eyes and say, I need help. And that is such a huge thing, particularly if you're British, because that's so inbuilt into our culture. You know, so having something that by design doesn't judge, we're really hoping it's going to make such a big difference to people who really do need to reach out and seek help, especially reaching out earlier than at crisis point. We're really hoping that that's going to make a difference. Okay, right, that's me on that now. Let me show you a little bit about how to use ChatGPT to create marketing content. Bear with me, because I'm not very good under pressure with technology. Right. Can you see oh, actually, I'm going to start with something else. Right, this is a marketing assistant that I've built on ChatGPT. It's a custom GPT, which means that you pay for an account and you can build it. You do not have to have a paid account to use it. Anybody can use it. And I've designed this for our locations, who I know some of them are here today. So it's really exciting to be able to show you what I'm about to send you as part of a wider marketing guide that's going to go out really soon. It's finished, by the way, Matt. I just need to send it out. So I wanted to show you an example of how this can really help our locations transform something very simple into something very presentable. So I think that Chelmsford are here today. I think Suzanne's here. So I'm going to use Chelmsford as an example. I'm going to take this Facebook post that they posted yesterday, and I'm going to copy it into the marketing assistant. And I'm going to say, I can't get out of saying please and thank you. I'm just not there yet. Please take this and make it into a blog post for street support Chelmsford. So this Facebook post is talking about warm spaces, which is something we have quite a few of across our locations on our different hubs. And it's just, warm spaces is somewhere you can go if you're a bit isolated, if your home's not got heating, if your home's not got electric, if you can't afford to pay for a telly, you can go and watch a telly. If you need a chat, they're brilliant. And this is one of the ones that's hosting it in Chelmsford. And then I've actually got the link up here to the listing it's talking about. So I'm going to copy that in as well. And I won't say much after this. I just want to let you see what it comes up with. So it's going to take this. So for those of you that know us and know the way we talk and the way we write, you'll see that this is completely in our tone of voice, because in order to build this assistant, I've fed it our values, I've fed it tone of voice, and I've fed it our marketing plan. And I've also fed it very common objectives for each of our partner locations. So basically to raise awareness and draw people into their localized hub on our website. So, I mean, you take off the hashtags if you're posting this on a blog site, but that's what's nice about it. There's always stuff you can change. It does always need to finish with the human touch, so you can get stuff like that, because, like, for example, those hashtags on our website aren't going to do anything. But what I will say is you absolutely do not have to be a marketer or have any knowledge of experience in marketing to be able to check that that's right. What I would say is anything that ChatGPT produces, humans must check it. And if you're not sure how, just read it out loud and say, does this sound like something I would say to someone I meet at a networking event? And if it doesn't, go back and work out why and ask ChatGPT to come up with something different. So that's that. The next thing I'm going to show you is a bit more applicable to hopefully everyone here, and it's about how to use like a free blank version of ChatGPT that knows nothing about you to create something that sounds like you. And Matt and I have put together very early this morning a simplified version of a template brand review. So I'm actually going to put this in the chat a bit later if anyone wants to nab it. It talks the 10 questions that Matt was talking about earlier that he asked all of us. He put them all on a Google form and sent them around. And these are those questions. Oh, did I do that? Whoops. And then after you've got everybody's answers to those questions, you can paste them straight into ChatGPT and use this prompt, and then it will come back with something. So this now I'm going to show you a document that's all our answers here. And then we've got like the summary of things here. So I think at the bottom we've got that, sorry, it's 12 pages. I will not make you read it all. Connecting solutions, that 2-word definer that Matt was talking about earlier in terms of our brand. So just very quickly, I'm going to copy all of this, literally just copy and paste it into a blank GPT, which I've already prepared earlier. Based off of this collection of answers and their analyses, create a tone of voice 1-pager for Street Support Network. Then I'm just going to paste in those 12 pages. Oh, just look how quick it is. It's good, isn't it? And I'll let you read this as it comes out. I won't spend ages on this, but I just want you to see how like right it is. It's ever so similar to the one I did before I knew of any of this existed. It will give you examples if you want examples of how to write. It's brilliant. What not to say. And you can then take a tone of voice document, circulate it around and make sure everyone is writing in the same tone of voice. Tell everyone to put this into their own ChatGPT and use it for their emails and their blogs and everything. It's brilliant. And then, so we've now got the tone of voice. I'm going to very quickly put in a prompt. I'm going to ask it to create me based off of just this. This has no memory, this conversation. Create 3 social media posts for me. So it breaks it down by who this post is aimed towards, and they're the people that we want to know about street support. So raising awareness of the service is the first one. Organisations and volunteers, asking them to get involved, maybe sign up their organisation or come and volunteer with us. And then for stakeholders and more strategy stuff. I guess this third one would be more like, I guess, selling street support because we are self-funded by our locations. And I don't really know what more to say other than that. That's how easy it is. Again, I'd tweak it myself. I'd read it out loud. I'd check that all the facts in there are correct, but then it's good to go. And I think that's it, Matt. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
So what you can do beyond that is, some of this stuff it can produce quite simply. When it comes to slightly longer, more strategic documents where there's more of a thought process involved, you might want to treat it more like a conversation. So you might have a first draft or an idea of something you want to say, and then you ask it to ask you some questions, give it some information, use it as part of an iterative process. That the best way to view a chatbot is as though it was an intern that is sat next to you. So you've got an extra colleague sat next to you. Just to dispel any myths about artificial intelligence, it's got an intelligence of roughly 120 to 130. So it's not Einstein. And that's important to realize. And you treat it like you would an intern. So you give it a piece of work, and then the intern comes back and you red ink the whole thing because it's not all that good necessarily the first time round. And then you realize that you'd forgotten to give it some context and to upload documents. And so there's all sorts of ways that you can then hone the conversation and work backwards and forwards on it. You might even want to use more than one. I mean, if I give you an insight into my process, I'd start writing a document and then upload it to ChatGPT. ChatGPT gives me a first draft output. I'll take that and then paste it into Claude AI and ask Claude AI what it thinks of that first draft, and it'll give me some pointers. And I'll take those pointers back to ChatGPT. And I might go backwards and forwards 10 times throughout that process until they both agree with each other. That's only on the content, though. You then take the final draft from that particular custom GPT tool and put it into another tool that we use, which is a human writing assistant, which is designed to make AI not sound like AI. And you ask it to soften the language to make sure that it's in Street Support Network's tone of voice, and it'll do that again. Once it's produced that, I'll take that and put that into Claude and get Claude to take another look and do a bit more of a back and forth. And you might be thinking, crumbs, that sounds like a complicated, protracted process. That is a fraction of the time to do all of that, that it would take you to sit there and just think about what it is that you want to write. And you might actually find that you've done it, that entire process, sat next to somebody who's trying to do it on their own, who still has a blank page in front of them by the time you've finished. It is that simple in a sense. But the reality is that the method behind the magic is the training on your data and on you. So if your organization doesn't have a brand review document, then nab the document that Mara's going to put in the chat. Do yourselves a brand review so that you've got all of that language, because it needs all of that to be able to understand who you are and how it can communicate like you. Then use that document to produce a tone of voice document. You can use from that flows your marketing strategy. As larger organizations here may well have all of these things in place and can just kind of grab some documents off their server and upload them to a custom GPT. Smaller organizations might not have those things available, so you'd need to start somewhere in terms of putting it all together. It took me a week to do the brand review with Street Support Network, and it wasn't a week of working flat out. It was just a week that it took to get the responses back from people. The actual time processing the information was really quick. So you can do this in the background whilst getting on with your other work. And you've then got some tools available that will be the building blocks upon which you build your custom GPTs and ensure that the outputs that you're getting from artificial intelligence are ethical, they sound like you, and they are quality, human-centered, vision and values-led prompts and posts. And all of that we're talking about here, these building blocks, stem from the most fundamental principle of artificial intelligence, which is audit before you automate. Why do you audit before you automate? Because if your current processes are bad, automating them would just get you to bad outcomes quicker. And that's not where you want to be. You want to get to good outcomes, so you need good processes. Artificial intelligence won't amend your processes. It will just automate them as they are. It will do as it's told, and you won't end up with good results at the end of it. So there is an opportunity, and I would say that every organization needs to be involved in doing this right now. Automation is coming, even if you're not there quite yet. And so right now, AI is like a digital mirror. It points to all the stuff within your organization that needs to be thought through, that needs to be revised, that needs to be amended. And you can get some quality stuff in place prior to the AI revolution and automation, so that when that really does come to your organization and you are starting to automate things, you're getting to good outcomes quicker, not bad outcomes. And why is all of this important, particularly within the context of small and medium-sized charities? Over the last 25 years, we now, through the internet and particularly platforms like YouTube, for example, have access to high quality marketing, leadership, management, and other tools at the click of a button. But we don't have in ourselves or in our organizations the capacity to be able to process all of that, to know where to start, to know how to apply it, to know how to make sure it's relevant to our organization, because we're in a resource constrained sector that doesn't have time or money. Bring in artificial intelligence that does all of that processing for you and have a go. So, if you build yourself a brand review and a tone of voice document, take those, upload them, go into ChatGPT or Claude or other, and say to it, right, I'd now like to articulate my organization within the framework of, for example, Simon Sinek's Golden Circle, which is start with your why, then look at your how, then look at your what. And it'll do it for you. It'll process that information. You might not necessarily completely agree with the first draft, but you have that iterative conversation. You go back and forth with it. And within a very short space of time, you'll have a document that says, this is why we exist as an organization. This is how we do what we do. And this is what we do. And that then can become part of the language that you use to communicate externally. And Simon Sinek would say that the best organizations are the ones that start with their why, understand their why, and are able to articulate it. And as charities, we need to be able to do that. That's just one example of a really quality leadership and management tool that is readily available on the internet and that you can easily use by getting artificial intelligence to process it for you, as long as you've got enough information to be able to feed it about who you are and what you do, and you've been through some of these processes. So build the blocks, put the foundations in place. Then you can even ask an LLM, this is where we're at, this is what we're doing, this is what we're thinking about right now as an organization. What do you think next steps might be in terms of best practice for our organization? What are the tools that are out there? Give me some recommendations, give me some things to try. And it will make recommendations as to things that you might want to have a go at. It really can be involved at every stage of the process, but then humans have to be as well. So an automation looks like use artificial intelligence, then bring in a human for review, then use it again, then do something human. And it's that sense of back and forth, making sure that we are at the heart of it. And it always starts with us and ends with us. But the process in the middle involves some tools that have really helped us to get from that starting point to the end point far quicker. So yeah, humans stay in the loop all of the way. I think I've talked about that process. Here's one that Mara initially absolutely hated me for. I would go through that process of producing content back and forth between Claude and Chat GPT, and then sending it to Mara, and then she'd kind of send it back red inked with all sorts of comments and stuff. Once we had about a dozen documents that Mara had red inked, I took the originals that I'd produced, Mara's updated versions, fed them all back into ChatGPT and asked it to analyze what it was that Mara was doing, what she was looking out for, what corrections she was making. And it gave me a set of instructions that I now call my Mara filter. So every document I produce now also goes through a Mara filter before it actually goes to Mara. And I think we've gone from, I think at the beginning, 6 months ago, Mara would have said that documents were about 75% of the way they're using AI. Now, I think she usually says they're about 90% of the way they're using AI. But that last 10%, for me, that is also the magic. And I'm not a marketer. I'm not somebody that is involved in communications in that way. I don't have her experience and skill set. So I go through that process. I don't actually tend to read the end result in much detail myself, because I know that Mara will do a better job of that than I can. So I send it over to her. She makes those corrections. But where we've gotten to now is that if she's not around, so she was on holiday 2 weeks a while back. If we're 90% of the way there and we need to publish something, we can probably safely do so. But when she is around, we get that extra push of quality. We get that real human review at the end of it. And she brings something unique to the table, which is never going to be replaced or replaceable. So you don't have to fear that these things are going to take over. You still need Damaras at the end of the process to be reviewing and just bringing that slight bit of nuance that we all really want to see in all the work that we're doing.
I didn't
Yeah.
hate you for it. I actually, when I first got that email that you said, by the way, I now have, oh, that's nice, Liz. Um, when you said, yeah, I've now got something that Mara proofs it, I thought, great. But then I told my boyfriend about it, and he was like, you're getting fired. Because he's got something now that's a lot cheaper than you, and funding is short, what makes you like your salary could make a difference. And so I told that to Matt. I just said, look, I do just have to check, is my job safe? Because now you've got all the work that I've produced and you've put it into this thing, and now you've got all the edits that I produce all the time and put it into this thing. But then we had a discussion about how if you want your writing to be values led, then it has to start and end with humans. ChatGPT and other LLM models, they're just not as reliable as humans with experience, and it won't replace it. And like Matt said, the stuff that we're putting out now is more than we could ever produce if I was doing it on my own, and it is to the standard we want it to be. And that just feels like such a dream, honestly, because you just feel better when you feel more accomplished. And the amount of work we're doing at the moment, like I personally feel really accomplished with it.
And that's where we're starting with our considerations around impact. So the initial impact, as you've just heard from Mara, is around job satisfaction. I think Mara was saying to me yesterday that when 6 months ago, if you'd asked her what was the one thing that would really make a difference in her job, it would be having a social media assistant, because she really couldn't stand the social media side of the work. Well, now she's got one. It's called ChatGPT, and it does a really good job of working with her, pairing with her. The interesting thing about LLMs is that you interact with them in three different ways as a general rule of thumb. They have three personas: assistant, which is the one that gets all of your drudge work and automates the stuff that you do on a regular basis and is repetitive. You have the creator, which is for creative content, and the strategist, which is clearly for the strategic stuff. And in our organization, there's three of us. James is our web developer, and he mainly uses the assistant. Mara is our comms and marketing director. She mainly uses it as a creator. And I'm the managing director, and I mainly use it as a strategist. And we interact with it on a different basis depending on what we're working on. So there's a sense that job satisfaction is significantly increased because you're doing less of the stuff that you find tedious and difficult, and it frees you up to have more time to do the human side of the job and the things that you love. And you're not constantly burnt out and stressed out trying to burn the candle at both ends, because you've got that increased sense of capacity, efficiency, and productivity. So there's a sense of individual impact. There's organizational impact. So where we're leading to is that because we can increase our capacity as an organization, and we are seeking to push out the knowledge and learning and the tools to our network, we can become more scalable and bring in more revenue without. Can you mute George? Or can Mara mute George? Without having to do more expense. And that is a more sustainable business model. So in this day and age, actually AI is part of helping us to become more sustainable and to retain our staff, because job satisfaction is up, we're less burnt out, we're enjoying and doing more of the things that we love to be doing. But then also, like I just said, we're looking at empowering our network. So making tools available, training, developing things that mean that our network partners become more efficient, more productive, which means that we have to do less as well, and everybody benefits from that. And then we've touched on this sense of the wider benefits around AI of machine learning. It's my firm view that if AI was trained on just 5% of data and material that came from the social sector, where quality trumps quantity, because corporate data, the other 95%, is very narrow in scope and very repetitive. So a small amount of training and data from our side of things on how to be human centered, vision and values led could significantly shift the needle in terms of how AI develops moving forwards. Um, let's try to work out how much more we need to say before we kind of take a few questions at the end. Um, yeah, so next steps. We want to turn inspiration into action. So, where would you start in all of this? Well, we've already talked about the possibility at an organizational level of doing a brand review and using that to create some building blocks from which you can start customizing something like ChatGPT, so that you basically just upload those documents into a custom GPT. And I think it's been mentioned in the chat that you do have to use the paying model to be able to create custom GPTs, but it's only £20 a month and you can create your own assistants and develop your own tools. That's not a huge amount of cost for the capability that it gives you. Um, and but at a personal level, if you're just looking to try it out, audit your workflow. So audit before automation, work out what are the tasks that you do on a regular basis, divide them into assistant, creator, and strategist in terms of how you operate in each of those tasks, and then pick one of each and just have a go of seeing what can I do to bring a bit of automation into my context, and see how you get on. But as we've already said, training is a key part of this. So as an organization, we're starting to offer training packages for organizations. So for £250, for as many people as you want to bring from your organization, you can have 2 hours of my time training you specifically on how to do workflow audits, build custom GPTs, work with ChatGPT, and get your staff trained up in how to use artificial intelligence. As far as I'm concerned, that is a quality training. It's good value for money. And within the first couple of weeks of people really using these tools, you get it back from the gains in productivity and efficiency. So that's well worth considering. What I've found so far in all the organizations I've worked with in training them up is that we have a room full of people who are a little bit skeptical at the very least to start off with. Before the end of the 2 hours of training, people are itching to get out of the training to get onto a computer to try out some of the stuff they've learned, because once your eyes have been opened to see what you can do with this, you're not going to look back. I'm just trying to say, yeah, there's I haven't managed to find the link, but I'm sure you can look it up. There's an organization called CAS, Charity Accelerator for Social Technology, that has an AI peer group that you can sign up for, that I'm part of. There's a lot of learning within that context. And it's not about experts presenting, it's about this sense of just sharing what we're doing. We're all on that same journey together, working towards how can we become more scalable, more efficient, more productive? How can we influence the use of these tools moving forwards? How can we raise the voice of our sector within this context of digital technology to make sure that we have a fairer, more equitable society, and that these tools are becoming more and more human-centered and values-led? Yeah, and oh yes, absolutely. Get if you want to embark on this journey, have a digital trustee on your board. That's really important, because if you're the only one that's advocating for AI, people can kind of dismiss it in a way that they're, you know, they're not quite sure about it. If you have a board member that understands these things, I am a digital trustee for another organization, it brings that sense of objectivity, of having a soundboard, of having somebody that can reassure other people, that can back up what you're saying. It's an essential step in this day and age to be embracing digital, embracing artificial intelligence technology. Every charitable board that is thinking about this or stepping into this area ought to have somebody that oversees that side of things. Your boards will have finance people, they'll have strategic people, your various different areas are covered. As we move into the AI age, that area really ought to be covered from a board point of view. And we're in the process of getting somebody on board as an organization that understands these things and that can advise our board on them. I think that's probably, unless you want to say anything else, Mara, I think that probably covers off enough to kind of hopefully give you a flavor of, you know, how you can go from zero AI to plus AI to AI plus, with AI integrated at the heart of your organization and helping you out with pretty much everything that you do in the space of 6 months. And on average, individual productivity goes up by about 40%. Imagine what you could do with 40% of your time on a weekly basis being given back to you, and what you could do with that. And we've got 10 minutes. So we're going to open up the floor to questions, if anybody has any.
I think Sandra had one earlier. Yeah. Let me go on then, Sandra.
Yeah, I see. You mentioned creating personas, and also I got as far as creating a personas, and drawing them and getting getting a picture of them, and I thought, oh, okay, this is fine. But I think you were suggesting that you could actually create things that these personas could say. Did I get that wrong? So
One of the things that you can do in, for example, the ChatGPT environment is there's a function for you to customize the way that you interact with the tool. So I have custom instructions in there, and it's got if I put star 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 strategist star 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 into Chat GPT, then there's a set of instructions embedded within my own account that says, this is how I want you to behave when I'm looking for a strategist. There's the same, you can do the same for creator, you can do the same for assistant. So you can give it boundaries, you can ask it to work in certain ways, you can, you know, you really are capable of customizing and defining those parameters to make it work for you in the way that it will bring the best out of you. And so we come back to augmented intelligence. It's so personalizable for organizations and for individuals that you can really make it your own. And that's one of the beauties of tools like this.
what I was thinking more of along the line was of service user personas.
Yeah, so I think Matt was talking about different personas that ChatGPT can be to serve you. In terms of like creating actual service user personas, have a little play with it. Go onto ChatGPT, put in some information about you or your organization, who you're trying to reach, who your service users are generally, and ask it to come back with some for you. And then you can build on that if you like it, if it makes sense, if it tracks. And you can really get it to flesh those out as much as you want. And actually, you were talking about drawing them. I don't like ChatGPT for any kind of image generation. I don't think it's reliable. But that might be different in this case because you're looking for something maybe like quite simple imagery. So you have a go, tell it to create someone for you.
And you can role play all sorts of scenarios if you want to. I think one of the ones that I use in the training is You just say to it, you know, I want a raise. Can you role play a conversation between me and the boss about asking for a raise? And you give it some context and some stuff for it, you know, and it'll role play the conversation with you and prepare you for it. I don't know if anybody remembers those books that you had back in the 80s where you opened up on page 1 and at the bottom it said, if you want to do this, go to this page. If you want to do that, go to this page. You can actually get ChatGPT to do that for you. So you give it a set of instructions about what the scenario is, what some of the background and context is, and then you ask it to play out that scenario, and it can go ad infinitum, and it'll just keep making things up as you go and taking you through a role play situation. That the capacity in that sense is quite extensive. There you go, choose your own adventure. That's absolutely it. You can do a choose your own adventure using ChatGPT with any criteria you want to. There is so much fun to be had. And you know, you have to be careful because, you know, if you don't put the safeguards in place, if you don't upload information about your organization, and if you're not specific about what you're asking for, then it might go off on a tangent and it might make things up, and sometimes it hallucinates. If you ask it for medical studies about prosthetics, it might just make them up. But if you ask it specifically, is that an actual medical study or did you make it up? It'll tell you whether it lied to you or not. So you kind of learn how to interact with it, how to fact check, how to verify, how to reread information. But the more context you give it, the more information you give it, the more documents you upload, the more of that background and preparatory work that you've done to put the building blocks in place, the less it goes off the rails, because you've trained it, you've led it, you've told it exactly what you want it to do. And generally speaking, you know, we're nowhere near sentient artificial intelligence, despite what people like Elon Musk will try and tell you. It's still all algorithms and predictive. And so if you tell it all your information, it predicts how that would need to be said based on what you've told it. It does what it's told, generally speaking. Occasionally, it will color outside of the lines. And if it's doing that, for example, within the context of a custom GPT, you go back into the instructions and you say, well, don't do that, please. And it stops doing it. So even after you've built a tool, you test it, you make it work for yourself, and then you go back and amend and...
Sorry, I wanted to say, especially in this context of vulnerable people, that so much of what we fight against is about stereotyping. So yeah, that's where I got really scared. I got to the point of, okay, here's a persona, here's a caricature of them, and now you're saying, yeah, it could even create what the personas going to, yeah, it would be stereotyping for me, wouldn't it?
Unless you asked it not to stereotype. You could base it on service users that you know have existed in the past. You could ask it for a range of genders and ages and races and sexualities and all of that kind of stuff. Give it a go, test it, because I think you might be surprised. And if it doesn't work for you, then you've lost nothing.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Anybody else got any questions before we finish up? So hopefully we've covered everything. We've addressed all, and that was the point really. We said it right at the beginning that we build user first principles into everything we do. So we have attempted throughout the entirety of what we've said today to address all of your concerns and questions within the body of what we were saying. And that way, and I think we might have done it well because we've gotten to the end and nobody, you know, all of the classic objections and questions that people would normally come up with haven't come up because we've covered it already. If you want to get in touch, our details have been put in the chat. Do consider signing up as an organization to do training. We go into more depth. You learn more about prompt engineering, about how to use these tools, how to build custom GPTs. It's a fantastic way to bring these things into your organization to get as many people trained up as possible. And you can find some fantastic examples. I sat down with someone yesterday from Girl Guiding. We identified that one of their pain points is risk assessments. By half an hour after the end of our conversation, we'd put together a tool that could be used by volunteers within Scouts and Girl Guiding for automatically producing risk assessments based on the criteria they input into a custom GPT. And it is already producing some fantastic risk assessments. These tools are easy to build once you know how. Get yourselves trained up, get curious, have a go, have some fun, and you'll discover that everything that we've said today is so true. And thank you for joining us today.